Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight, and thanks for your patience. So glad you could be with us here for our event with Rebecca Roanhorse and Charlie Jane Anders. My name is Evan Karp. I am the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. I'm here to discuss the book is Neighborhood Superhero and Booksmith Charlie Jane Anders. Charlie Jane is the author of Victories Greater Than Death, the first book in a new young adult trilogy coming in April 2021, along with the forthcoming short story collection, Even Greater Mistakes. Her other books include The City in the Middle of the Night and All the Birds in the Sky. Her fiction and journalism have appeared in the New York Times, The Washington Post, Slate, McSweeney's, Mother Jones, The Boston Review, Tor.com, Tin House, Conjunctions, Wired Magazine, and other places. Her TED Talk, Go Ahead, Dream About the Future, got 700,000 views in its first week. With Annalee Newitz, she co-hosts the podcast Our Opinions Are Correct. And Rebecca Roanhorse is the New York Times bestselling author of Trail of Lightning, Storm of Locusts, Star Wars Resistance Reborn, and Race to the Sun. She's won the Nebula, Hugo, and Locus Awards for her fiction and was the recipient of the 2018 Astounding Award, formerly Campbell Award, for Best New Writer. Her forthcoming book, Black Sun, her just out book, Black Sun, was published this week. Hasn't been in the world for a full week, and we're excited to hear more about it tonight. Rebecca lives in New Mexico with her family. Welcome, Rebecca, and congratulations on the book. Charlie Jane, thanks so much for joining us. I'll turn it over to you two.
Yeah, thank you so much, Evan. And, I feel like we're having some interdisciplinary magic as well tonight. So, I'm excited about that. And I just wanted to say that Booksmith is an amazing bookstore. I'm really proud and happy to have it as my neighborhood bookstore. And, anything y'all can do to support Booksmith and keep the interdisciplinary magic going with that store, please do. Please buy Rebecca's book signed from them. Please buy all the books from them, just like every book ever published. Buy it from Booksmith, please, because they're such a great store. And I'm just so excited to be here with Rebecca to talk about Black Sun, which I finished reading like last week, and it blew my mind. I love this book so much. The only thing I don't like about it is that I have to wait for the second book and the third book to find out what happens, because I'm just like so in love with this world and these characters, and I just am like so incredibly stoked to get to talk to you about it, Rebecca. And thank you so much for joining me, and congrats on the new book and everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, where did the original idea for this book come from, and how important for you was it to kind of do a fantasy world based on pre-Columbian Americas and like the societies of the Americas before Columbus?
Yeah, well, I'm a huge epic fantasy fan. I've been reading the genre since, I was a kid. I grew up reading everything, Dragonlance Chronicles, Wheel of Time, the Belgariad, all that good stuff. And so this was just, all the tropes and all the, adventure and all the things that you find in epic fantasy are things that I love. I also have been reading a lot just out of my own sort of joy or my own sort of interest about sort of pre-Columbian and Mesoamerican cultures. And so it was just really a natural fit to bring those two loves and interests together. I think I've always wanted to read an epic fantasy inspired by the pre-Columbian Americas. And so Black Sun is not a history book. It is definitely, a flight of imagination. It is definitely fantasy. So, don't read it and think I'm going to be historically accurate. I was not. But hopefully I captured some of the flavor of that world so that it feels like it, so it doesn't feel European, or it doesn't feel even like, Asian inspired or something. It feels like it's inspired by the cultures, of the Americas. And that was really the goal, was just to capture sort of that feeling and some of the joy and even raise up, some of the things like the architecture and the city planning and the archaeoastronomy, like some of the fascinating things from the pre-Columbian cultures that I think either a lot of people don't know about or that we don't seem to value very much in our history, which is really unfortunate because, wow, there's some cool stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to draw on. It's such rich cultures and so much that most people, as you said, are unaware of now. And can you walk us a little bit through the process of taking, real life archaeology and real life history and creating a secondary world out of it as opposed to doing a historical fantasy?
Yeah, well, let's see. I picked the cool stuff, and that's what I put in my book. Well, yeah, I don't know. There were things like, okay, for example, there is a sea voyage in Black Sun. So I wanted to include that because that is a very sort of epic fantasy trope. But I didn't want it to feel, I wanted it to feel like it was in the Americas. So I did sort of a deep dive into the maritime Maya. I wanted to know how they built ships. I wanted to know sort of what their coastal travels look like. There's a lot of trade in the pre-Columbian world that doesn't get really talked about much, but they found things at the tip of South America, on what is now the border of Canada or in California. So obviously these people moved around and they moved goods around, and I wanted to capture some of that. For sailing methods, for example, I couldn't really find a lot on pre-Columbian sailing methods, but I turned to traditional Polynesian sailing methods because I wanted it to feel indigenous, and so that's sort of what I used for the book, and then added sort of my own imagination and flavor to that. So nothing should be really a one for one or anything, but it's more capturing sort of the spirit, I guess, of those places and those people and their methods.
Yeah, one of the things I loved in Trail of Lightning was the character of Maggie, who's this total badass monster fighter with like a complicated past. And, right when you meet her right on the first page, she's like kind of flawed and complicated. And she's like haggling with these people when they're like, find our daughter. And she's like, kind of having a whole negotiation. Well, I love that. That's like one of my favorite novel openings over the last few years. And I feel like in this book, I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of her name, but Ciala, the Teak character, the captain of the ship, feels like she's kind of cut a little bit from the same cloth as Maggie. And I wanted to kind of hear more about how you go about creating these heroines who are, flawed and selfish but also like tough and resourceful and can be super generous. And like, whether you got pushback ever for making these characters as selfish or as flawed as they can be, and whether female characters are allowed to be as kind of as selfish as male characters. I guess that's like 20 questions, but
that's okay. I'll try to answer what I can. Actually you did a good job because it's Ciala. So you're Ciala. Okay. I'm a big believer in allowing people to pronounce those epic fantasy names however they want. I had a friend that insisted that like Jamie in A Song of Ice and Fire was Jaime until the very end. And I'm going to let her keep that. So anyway, however you want to pronounce the names is okay with me, but I say Ciala. Right, so she's a sea captain, speaking of the voyage in this story, and we meet her, I think she's waking up in jail, hungover, not remembering what happened the night before, knows she hooked up with a beautiful woman, and that's about it. And she hit a guy because her knuckles are just like messed up. So that's sort of how we meet her. She is a hot mess, and it's all about sort of her, she has a journey, let's say, a character arc that she has to go through. I think she's like Maggie in a way because they are sort of these in-your-face women who sort of take no shit and know who they are. But the thing about Maggie is she really struggles with her violent nature. So she's sort of constantly sort of dealing with that. Am I a monster or am I a hero? Does like this thing that I have that makes me kill people, does it damn me or does it save me sort of thing? Whereas I always say that Ciala, the only thing that she will destroy is herself. She's not violent at all, despite hitting that guy. He had it coming. But it's just like sort of self-destructive. She's sort of drinking herself to death kind of thing. So that's, sort of where they really differ. And there's another point of view female character in the book, which is Narampa. And she's a very different kind of character than I think I'd written before. And probably the most difficult female character I've written, because it's the one that maybe is less like me, although maybe she's my better angels, and my other characters not so much, because she's always trying sort of doing the right thing. My thing for Narampa is that my tagline for her is that, you know, she comes from the wrong side of town. She rises to this sort of the priesthood, the highest sort of level of authority in this institution. But never fits, right? Never quite fits in. She's not accepted. People are scheming behind her back, sort of thing. And I always say for her that she fell in love with an institution that did not love her back. And so all of these women are very different kinds of women. And that was really my goal. Yeah, I wanted to create, you know, different kinds of characters, not just the Maggie, which is, you know, sort of this in-your-face character, but capture some of the subtleties and some of the flaws, different ways to be a woman.
Yeah, and I definitely think that there are a lot of wonderful layers to Ciala, and that she definitely, I didn't mean to say that she's, you know, I feel like she and Maggie have a certain kind of tough quality in common, but you know, the thing I love about Maggie is how, you know, she has this complicated heritage that she's in touch with, and her whole teak nature. And actually that kind of leads into the next thing I wanted to ask about, which is, without getting too much into spoiler territory, there is a really beautiful romance in this book. And I was, you know, how did it feel to be writing such an unconventional romance, and how did you approach that? And, or was it something you planned, or was it something that kind of just came out in the writing of it?
I always say that, well, not always, just earlier tonight, I said that it was probably about 75% planned, 25%, oh, what's happening here? Because I knew I had these characters, and I knew how their paths were going to cross. Because in Black Sun, you sort of have these 4 point of view characters who are all sort of headed to this literally a cosmic convergence where they're all going to sort of like clash, and there's a lot of C's. And so I knew that Ciala and Serapio were going to cross paths the way that they were going to cross paths, but I didn't really realize sort of the friendship that happens between them that then sort of turns into a romance, which is a little bit of a spoiler, was going to happen the way that it did. But for me, actually, that became sort of the engine of the story. That became the heart of the story, which sort of humanized both characters. The sort of vulnerability that they show with each other is something that I don't think you would have gotten from the story without that romance.
Yeah, and I love that romance so much. It's one of my favorite romances that I've read recently, like in the last few years. And I just, you know, I've been thinking about it a lot since I read the book. About Narampa, like, and again, I hope I'm not butchering the pronunciation of the names, but you know, how much is her story, again, without getting into spoiler territory, but you said she comes from the wrong side of tracks. She's been elevated to this high position within the priesthood. How much is her story kind of about the difficulty of changing institution from the inside, which is, I think, something that we're all kind of thinking about right now? Like, can we change flawed, broken institutions from the inside, or is it, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely what her character is about. And I won't give away, you know, anything, but, you know, it's a tough road, especially when institutions don't want to change. And so, you know, a lot of book 2 is going to be sort of exploring sort of the repercussions of everyone's actions, but certainly, you know, sort of what happens to that institution in the aftermath of, you know, sort of how the book all comes together in the end. But yes, that is exactly what her character is about. And one of the things I tried to do was some of the characters she interacts with, you know, are very much sort of the dominant group. So they're who are responsible for a genocide. I don't think that that's too spoilery. I think that comes out pretty early, that so her and Serapio are at odds because he is the one sort of seeking vengeance for this genocide. And there are people within Narampa circles that, you know, say things like, well, I wasn't alive when that happened, so I'm not responsible for that. You know, things that you hear real life people say on social media, right? And so how do you, I wanted to take on that question though. You know, I wanted to sort of, one of the joys of a writer is you get to take on things like that and sort of look at both sides and then be like, Yeah, well, that's ridiculous, right? But I did want, to give a character, that sort of attitude, and then sort of let that play out, see how that happens, and explore questions like that.
Yeah, and I think that works wonderfully. And actually, one of the things that you do with Narampa's story in particular is you kind of give us a flash forward early on in the book to kind of her, almost the end of her journey. And it's, but it doesn't, you don't really learn what it means until much later, which actually, I'm really curious, what made you decide to use this kind of jumping around in time structure where kind of, it's sort of very infinite jest in a way, kind of like this thing of like, kind of, we start out seeing the end of the story and then we kind of go back and forth in time.
Yeah, it's so funny. I saw someone who said, "Well, I wasn't surprised by like how Narampa's story in this book ended. I figured it out." And I was like, "Well, I hope you figured it out because I told you in like this first, my introduction of our chapter. Damn." But it was very much
that person is just a detective. They're detective.
It was very funny. But I actually for her story, I didn't actually want it to be a mystery, or I didn't want that to be where the tension was in the story. Like there's still a lot of tension in the story. You still don't know how she got to this place where she ends up, and so the steps along the way. It's sort of the difference between I just want to say it the other day, the difference between a twist and like suspense. So my goal with Narampa was not to make it a twist that, the reader figures out and, now we're so smart, we did that. No, but I think you can build tension. I think you can still build, a certain level of anxiety in the reader around her fate by knowing how she's going to end up. In some ways, that's even more powerful to me. And there's plenty, I think, of tension in Serapio's storyline, or sort of twist, I guess, in Serapio's storyline, to carry the reader forward. So I guess for Narampa, because she is sort of dealing, with the questions that we talked about, I didn't want it to be this is not quite the word I would pick, but I didn't want it to be gimmicky, or I didn't want it to be like, I just wanted it to be like, oh man, more of that kind of emotion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it works beautifully because knowing, seeing kind of this glimpse of where she ends up at the end of the book, right at the start, just adds to the tension. And it's just like, oh my God, behind you, right behind you, just right. Turn around. Right. It's like in a horror movie when you're like, don't go in the basement. What are you like? And, I feel like that actually really makes her story work like on a whole other level and you don't know how you don't know how it happens. You just know that things are going to happen. And, I think it actually really helps because, she's kind of almost in the Daenerys role in a way, even though Daenerys comes from privilege originally. We talked about, you mentioned Jaime Lannister, so that kind of put me on the Game of Thrones track, but she's in that role of trying to like govern a place that is not easy to govern, and it's super interesting. So you mentioned that for this book you had it maybe 75% figured out, 25% not figured out, and you were figuring stuff out as you went. I mean, so slight digression, I'm working on one young adult trilogy right now. First book is done. It's typeset. Its galleys have gone out. Arcs have gone out. I can't change anything in it anymore, which is, there are times when I'm like, oh crap, I could just change this one thing. And I'm currently like literally like an hour ago was outlining the third book and just doing like my 10th outline of the third book. And I'm like, well, I can change some things in the second book if I have to, because I've only done a first draft of the second book. So anyway, I guess my question is, how much of like the rest of the trilogy did you have figured out when you wrote this book? And were there times when you were like, how far into book 3 are you? And were there times when you were like, oh, I wish I could change this one thing in book 1, but it's too late or something, or, or did you have it mostly figured out in advance?
Oh my gosh. I'm so embarrassed because I'm like, book 3. I haven't even thought about book 3.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to like.
I'm just kidding. So when I wrote book one, I did not know how anything was going to end. I just knew that story, right? But I really think of it, the trilogy, sort of like in a 3-act structure, I guess. So
Right.
when I sat down to write book two, which is still in progress, I was like, I cannot write book two until I know how it ends, right? Because if you try, then your book two is sloppy. It's that mushy middle stuff, right? So you kind of have to know your goal so that your characters are all moving towards that goal in some sort of, with some sort of whatever movement towards goal sort of feeling. So I did. Now I know how it's going to end. And now I sort of have to just figure out how everybody gets there. So I have some like tent poles. I know I know need this to happen. I know I need this character to confront this character. I know that I need this character to deal with this issue, things like that. But I don't have, that is it, Chip. Like that is so like I have those things. I know the ending, and everything else I got to figure out as I draft.
I mean, that's part of the fun, right? And
part of the terror, yes.
It's part of the fun, and you figure out stuff as you go, and the stuff that you come up with on the fly is often the most fun stuff. Like I feel
That's true.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get better about outlining, but I don't know. So actually that leads me into the next thing I wanted to ask about, which is sort of about the outline of the world, which in your case is there's a prophecy. There's, you've got a lot of epic fantasy stuff in this book. You've got like a quest where, again, no spoiler or not getting as deep into spoiler territory, but instead of taking a ring to a place, you have to take a person to a place by a certain time. And there are prophecies and there are things that are supposed to happen. And there are, things that are kind of, expected or foreordained. And, that's kind of a staple of epic fantasy. And it's one of the things that I love about the genre. But how do you create a story that has that much prophecy and that much kind of destiny without, making the characters feel like chess pieces, which they definitely didn't in this case?
Yeah. Well, thank you. Right. So there's a prophecy, but it's not really a prophecy that you learn about until about halfway through the book, right? So you're not and the character who is supposed to fulfill this prophecy, the way that he's set on his path is sort of questionable. So what I was really trying to do to a certain degree is play with this chosen one trope. And that if this person is really the chosen one, well, how did they get chosen? And he was chosen in this incredibly sort of dark, brutal manner. And gets saddled with a destiny that he does not particularly want, but he doesn't know that he has a choice yet, right? So, there's a lot sort of there, and I'm sort of trying to dig into ideas of generational trauma and ideas of like what we pass on to our children and the burdens that we pass on to our children that we expect them to fulfill. And so, prophecy or not, prophecy, I think Shell actually says something like, I'm not one for prophecies. It's just I'd rather decide my own fate. What is all this words with, dead white guys in a scroll sort of, feel to it. And so for Serapio, this is like an idea he's never even considered. What do you mean I don't have to fulfill a prophecy? So that's the way I think I'm trying to play with those ideas. So while the familiar tropes are there, I'm trying to put humans in their place and give them choices. Because I think what I'm always coming back to in my writing is the way that we all make choices. And then, the choices we make sort of determine who we are or how we move through the world. And we don't have to, just because we did it A or just because our families did it, way A doesn't mean that we have to do it way A. And, there are options. And so I think, maybe that helps to create a more rounded sort of approach to some of these tropes that are not like, I'm not trying to play with massive, concepts of good and evil and these are going to clash and Sauron and, and that sort of thing. What I'm trying to say is like, oh, there's all, we're all humans and not so much that good and evil is a perspective, because I don't believe that, but I believe that often people are just trying to do their best. There are those who are not. We could throw them in the pit, but for the rest of us, we're just trying to like do our best, and that's sort of what I'm trying to get at.
Right. And so we're going to open it up to questions in a minute. So if anybody has any questions, you can ask them in the chat here. You can send them to Evan privately, and he'll pass them on to me. But meanwhile, I have one final question, which is a little bit more silly, which is, honestly, when we were talking about Ciala earlier, I was like, she's kind of the Han Solo. She's kind of the Han Solo of this universe. And then I was thinking about how you wrote a Star Wars novel, and is there a Star Wars character that you wish you could write about, or a Star Wars, or a period of Star Wars, or a part of Star Wars that you're like, I really wish I could write a novel about X in the Star Wars universe?
Oh gosh.
You probably get this a lot, but
well, I haven't gotten it for a while, so I'm not sure I have an answer. Yeah, I'm really interested. I think I got to write Darth Maul for a middle grade anthology, but that did not hold me back. I went like sort of full bore on Darth Maul. I hope I scare small children. I hope that is just really intense and too much for a lot of people. For a lot of 8 to 12-year-olds, I won't be into it to 12-year-olds. But so that was fun. That was really fun. And actually, I'm going to nerd out for just a minute, but in the Clone Wars, his character has such a transformation, and he becomes this sort of like, underground. Well, I guess if you saw the Solo movie, you get some of this too. But anyway, he becomes like a sort of like a mafia king sort of figure. And so that whole sort of the people in the middle in Star Wars, the ones that are not on, the Jedis, and the ones that are not the Sith, you're not on the good or the bad. You're like the criminals in the middle, just trying to survive in this sort of crazy world. You're the bounty hunters, you're the lounge singers, you're the people in between. I think they're all really interesting. And so those are the people probably that I would love to write next.
Cool. So do we have any questions, Evan? Anybody? Okay, so it looks like we have a question from Sandra, who just finished Black Sun and loved it, and wants to know how much research did you do before writing, or did you just use the background knowledge and life experiences that you already had, and how did you decide which pre-Columbian cultures to combine or take inspiration from?
Right. Well, I talked a little bit about this. So I've been reading on pre-Columbian cultures for decades. It's just always an interest that I've had, particularly the Mexica and the Triple Alliance. And but then I got more specific as my needs for the story grew. So I knew I needed like a maritime culture because I wanted to talk about, that. So I sort of drilled down on the maritime Maya and things like that. So yeah, that's, I guess, interest and need. That's kind of how I decided. And of course, for the city, just there's such a plethora. I hate to use that word. I just get stuck with the Princess Bride. But there's such a variety of like cities and interesting, architecture and interesting things going on with so many of the pre-Columbian cultures that I wanted to add. There were things I wanted to take, sort of from each one, like the bridges, of the Incan and the cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans. And so I sort of mixed those things just that sounded really cool, quite frankly. But, yeah, that's kind of my answer.
Yeah. So actually, following up on that, Anna Lee was asking, like, if there are real life places or, real life ancient cities or landscapes that you were using. And you mentioned a little bit of that, but like, for example, Anna Lee was saying that they recognize Chaco Canyon in the book, and you mentioned the Pueblo Cliff Dwellings, which I guess is also part of Chaco Canyon.
Mesa Verde, Machu Picchu, and of course Anna Lee was very helpful in teaching me about Cahokia. So the Mississippi Mound Builders had an influence in the book, and not so much in this book. It ended up that the story ended up being focused in a different city, but certainly in book 2 and in the future book 3, the city of Hokaia is inspired by Cahokia.
Ooh.
Yeah, so I'm really gonna
right. That's where the military college is, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we go there for like a minute, but we don't really get to spend much time there.
Right.
Yeah.
So a little like tease for book 2, you're going to spend more time there. And so, yeah, so things like that, I'm very excited. And I think so many people don't know about, one of the great civilizations of history that's like right under their nose, just right outside of St. Louis. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
people don't even know, and so that sort of thing inspires me, that gets me excited. And if my book, even and my acknowledgments, I think the very last paragraph is it's like a list of maybe 5 or 10 books that I encourage people to go read, that I think are very accessible. Everything from the Corvid research that I did to these pre-Columbian cultures. And so maybe my book will get people interested in going and finding out the actual history, or the actual, archaeology, or whatever that is. And if that happens, then I'm absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, and I noticed Annalee thanked in your acknowledgments, and of course Annalee has an amazing book coming out early next year called Four Lost Cities that talks about Cahokia. And actually, slight sidetrack, like when Evan was introducing this event, I think it was a crow, might have been a raven, a very large corvid squawking. I wasn't sure if that was in Evan's background or yours, but can you talk a little bit about the corvid research that you did? Because I love the corvids in this book, and I love all the little notes about corvids in them.
Yeah.
At the chapter headings.
Yeah. Gosh, I think one of the first things, I had written something, or I had mentioned something. I think this was even before I had sort of written it, sort of early on, about corvids liking shiny things, or crow finding something shiny. And Joe Monty, my editor, was like, not true. They don't like shiny things. And so I was like, oh, snap. Well, maybe I don't know anything about crows. So I had to go and he said, Annalee knows crows. You should ask her. So that did happen. But I went and did some other crow research. I did not put that all on for Annalee. But one of the cool things, I found out is they sort of hold these grudges, in the sense that
I know
if you do them wrong, they recognize your face, they tell their children, they pass that on to their children, like they will know forever, so it's like, don't piss the crows off, because they will come for you. And I thought, well, there's my God of vengeance, like there he is right there, this long memory, this idea of long memory, and this idea of, righting a wrong. It just sort of made sense. So that was sort of what inspired the crow god, and how he plays a role, in the story. And I have a crow family that lives near my house.
Oh.
And I live kind of on a mountain, and they circle the valley, and they come and they land on my roof, and they'll just talk and talk and talk. And there's actually a house next door, and like one day, like 30 of them came, and they were all on the roof, just la la, just chatting away. I don't know, they're having a little crow meeting. And so I was like, well, they come and chat with me all the time. They clearly want to be in the book. So
you can't say no to the crows, man.
I know. At your own risk. I don't think I'd say no to a crow.
Yeah, seriously. So actually, Sandra has another question, which is, are you able to say when the second book of the trilogy is coming out? Because we're all already more, give me more.
I'm pretty sure it's fall of 2021. So this time next year.
Okay, good. That is awesome. That is excellent. And Kaz wants to know, we already talked a little bit about Star Wars, but Kaz wants to know, are there any science fiction tropes in this book? Do you kind of blur the lines between science fiction and fantasy, which I feel like I can see a little bit of, but I'm curious to see your answer, to hear your answer.
Well, it is called Black Sun. So I will tell you, there were a number of little publicity hits that I got that were in this gripping space opera, Black Sun. And I was like, wow, they did not read the book. So that's fine. I know you can't always read the book, but clearly this is not a space opera. And you're going to find sort of these, there are sort of celestial themes through all the book, but that's because the pre-Columbian cultures were sort of obsessed with sort of celestial bodies and alignments and all of that. And I wanted to capture some of that idea, some of the flavor of that. I think this is pretty much straight up epic fantasy. I was certainly trying to stay in that realm.
Yeah. So, Justina wants to know if what impact the global pandemic has had on your writing and research practice, if there are any new novel ideas that you came up as a result of the pandemic, or ideas that you had to put on the back burner?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, well, so not for Black Sun. It was done and sort of in the hopper come March. I think I turned it in this like final edit the second week of March, and then boom, the pandemic. So it got it under the wire. But I will tell you, probably in June or so, I had a great idea. So I was just, weighed down by sort of the state of the world, as so many of us were. And I just wanted to write something light. Like I tend to write pretty dark stuff. And I was like, I'm going to write sort of like, I don't know, like a comedy of manners, but it's going to be sort of set in like, Edwardian America, though, right? I'm gonna do like this sort of Western steampunk, indigenous steampunk sort of novella. And so I got it all, together. I pitched it to my editor. He loved it. He bought it, and then like I forgot, something happened. I don't know if it was the pandemic or something, just the state of the world just went a little less, towards hell in the handbasket. And all my sort of positive, excited, I'm going to write something like really cheery, just went out the window. Man. And I was like, you know what? I don't have it in me. I don't have it in me. So, yeah. So I've got about a half of a novella that's like sort of lighthearted. And maybe I will try to come back to that at some point. But, that was something that I would have never thought to have written that without the pandemic. But unfortunately, the pandemic also killed it.
Oh, man. Well, I hope you get back to that at some point because it sounds amazing. And I would read the hell out of that. That sounds like an amazing book. And yeah, I mean, it's been, God, writing during the pandemic has been an interesting challenge.
Yeah,
it's been
how's it going for you?
The first spring, basically spring of 2020 was just like a total disaster for me. I had a bunch of family crises. Things kind of went off the rails for a while there, but also, and it was just really hard to concentrate with everything going to hell. But also my writing routine was so much based around like going to cafes and sitting in cafes and having like a change of scenery every now and then and just being like, okay, I'm only going to write at home now. That was actually surprisingly difficult to adjust to. And I had to find a new writing routine that made sense for me. And I think I finally hit on one, and it's actually been really good recently, but it was challenging. It was really hard. And I feel like 2020 is definitely one of my less productive years for sure. Like in terms of just overall, yeah. I managed to get the second book of the trilogy done. I have the third book is it's coming, and I'm working on this other novel that I can't even talk about yet, but it's been tricky. Yeah. So, I have a couple more questions, and then okay. Evan, how are we doing for time? Should we try to knock off around 7? Do you think? I kind of figured we'd go until like 7-ish, a little after 7. I don't know if Evan is still here. He can always respond in chat too. Anyway, so Steve was asking, what made you decide to use epigraphs at the start of chapters, and also how was your FIACon experience?
Oh, hi Steve, how are you?
Hi.
What did I use? Oh, the epigraphs. So at the beginning of each chapter, I used various epigraphs, everything from excerpts from a Book of Lamentations to a mythological cycle, to observations on crows kept by a 13-year-old girl, travel journals, things like that. And the reason I added those actually came late in the drafting, was to add some weight to that world. I wanted these cultures and these people, I wanted the cultures to feel like they had been around for hundreds of years, if not thousands. And so what the epigraphs allowed me to do was sort of dip into these sort of almost like primary texts or something that would have come from the cultures that give it some heft and some foundation, because suddenly you have a larger world that's than the beyond what's just on the page, right? You're like, oh, there's a whole book of Lamentations out there somewhere, and where did that come from, and what does that look like? And so it's enough to give you sort of that feel or that flavor of history, without sort of taking the pacing and the tension away from the main story. So that's the way those sort of function. And then Fiacon was great. Thank you for asking. That was a con recently. Yeah, God, they did a good job, didn't they?
So good.
They put that together in like 2 months, and it was international and it was diverse, and they just blew the socks off that thing. So congrats to that team.
They did an amazing job, and I feel like I was saying to someone the other day, I feel like Fiacon really benefited from starting from scratch and not trying to take an existing convention and just turned it into a virtual convention. But also, you know, it seemed like they really paid attention and listened and paid attention to the mistakes that other cons maybe had made. And, you know, there was just a lot of really good thought that went into it. And all the panels were just amazing. Like the programming was so great.
Yeah.
Everything
so
I got
fresh.
to see was so good.
Yeah.
So I think this is like a good final question, maybe, which is, so Lydia Rogue wants to know, how was the world building similar or different between Black Sun and Trail of Lightning, you know, based on like, obviously Trail of Lightning is kind of the near future of our world, and Black Sun is a secondary world. How is it creating a new world from scratch versus like creating a future world?
Yeah, well, so Trail of Lightning is really just based on lived experiences. I didn't do research really. That was just, I was living on the Navajo Nation. This was my day to day, like Maggie was in Crystal. I lived in Crystal, you know, the roads Maggie takes are the roads I drove, you know, all that sort of stuff. It's just sort of my world, the world that I was living in. And then in the future, and then we have an apocalypse and things change a bit. But as far as like world building goes, it just came from lived experience, what I know. Obviously, Black Sun took a lot more research and a lot more work because I'm drawing from historical cultures. And so while the characters are very sort of me and contemporary in a lot of ways, the world building itself clearly took a lot more research and a lot more depth and sort of traditional world building tools.
Right. So actually, we have one last question, which I think we could speak in under the wire. Naomi wants to know, when will we see book 3 of The Sixth World?
Oh, well, that will depend on my publisher. It's not really my call. So we'll see what the future holds for The Sixth World.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca. This is such a wonderful event. I'm really glad I got the chance to chat with you again.
Yeah.
And, you know, I love Black Sun so much, and I'm so excited to read the rest of the trilogy. And I just want to encourage everybody watching this to get a signed copy of Black Sun from Booksmith if you possibly can. Even if you've already bought 5 copies, you know, a 6th copy will just like complete the set. They make great gifts. You know, you might have people in your life who just really need a signed copy, or you might have several people in your life who need a signed copy of Black Sun. And, you know, Booksmith is such a great store. It really, like, it deserves and needs your support. And it's such an amazing store. And, you know, and I will say that for me personally, I will be happy to sign any of my books that are available from Booksmith. I can even sign in personalized because I can just walk down the street and do it. So if you ever want to get one of my books signed from Booksmith, I'm sure you can, there's a way to let them know that you want it signed. But anyway, thank you so much, Rebecca. Is there anything else you want to let people know about what you're doing coming up, or where they can find you online or anything like that?
Well, just the second book, hopefully, and Between Earth and Sky will be out next year. And you can always find me at RebeccaRoanhorse.com or on Twitter at RoanhorseBex, BX.
Yay. Thank you so much. And Evan, is there anything else I forgot?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank everyone also and congratulate you again, Rebecca. This has been wonderful, and best of luck with the book. You know, we're all looking forward to the next installments. And Charlie Jane, thank you so much for being here as always.
Yeah, thank you, Charlie Jane. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely my pleasure. It was my absolute pleasure.
It is the case that you can request signed Charlie Jane Andrews books from Booksmith. So if you're checking out, just put a note in special feed when you're ordering.
I'll even sign other people's books. I'll sign anything. I'll sign body parts. If you have a body part, just send it to Booksmith. I'll sign it. They'll send it back. Anyway, sorry. But, definitely get your signed copy of Black Sun, because this book is amazing and you do not want to sleep on it. Read it before all the spoilers are out on the internet. So, read it now and definitely get your signed copy immediately.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you.
I'll take care, stay safe, and hope to see you again soon.
Bye.